Chapter 14. The Slay-Slack Warriors. It happened when Jinto was enduring more holovision to polish his Clasbulian, sudden noises from behind. Startled, Jinto turned his head, only to find 4 men storming inside. He jumped to his feet. "Resistance is futile," shouted the one short one at the head of the pack. Each of the men had their paralyzer guns aimed square at Jinto. The slightest funny move, and they'd make him stiffer than a petrified log. Who are you people?" Jinto shouted back. "Can't you tell we're police officers?" replied the short one, clearly offended. Police, so they've finally come knocking." Jinto's palms grew sweaty. The men all wore matching uniforms of green on yellow, which hardly screamed police to him. Jinto's image of officer uniforms was more unaffected, but here in Clasbule, the land of garish taste, he supposed they were relatively sober in color. "Now where's your little friend?" "The Ov girl," said Shorty. "Ov girl? Maybe you've got the wrong room." Leifir had retired to the bedroom. Jinto clung desperately to the faint hope that he could, maybe, conceivably talk his way out of this. "She must be asleep already," he said, seeing right through him. "What are you doing awake anyway? You got a screw loose? Don't you know it's bedtime? You're really screwing up our plan. Should I, apologize or something?" thought Jinto. "You." Shorty looked over his shoulder at one of his men. He was a big, sturdy, black-skinned man. "Go take a look." The big lug nodded and headed for the bedroom door. Another of the men, a lean, fully shaven officer who resembled a crane on a weight loss program, accompanied him. No. The threat of the paralyzers evaded his mind as he leapt at the big one. Annoyed, Big Lug knocked him back onto the ground with a swing of his arms. He tried to get back up, but froze when he saw the muzzle in front of his face. "You've got guts, I'll give you that." Shorty thrust the paralyzer right between his eyes. "But the next time you move, I won't be so lenient." "Did you come to arrest us?" "That's what they want." "What they want?" "Zip it. You'll hear all about it later." Shorty shot a glance at Big Lug. "Hey." Jinto took full advantage of that moment's inattention and grabbed his arm. They tussled and locked bodies, and even as they rolled across the floor, Jinto kept Shorty's arm pinned, twisting his wrist with a jerk. "Ow!" Shorty dropped his paralyzer. Jinto reached to grab it, but at that moment, 2 of the others fell on top of him, the officer who'd followed Big Lug, and the 4th, a young man with close-cropped hair dyed yellow. "God damn it." Jinto was pinned face down. Slim was sitting astride Jinto's waist like a horseman, while Youngin was leaning forward against Jinto's back and twisting his arms. "Keep him there." Shorty squeaked as he retrieved his gun. "What if we gave him a shock to the system?" proposed Youngin. Shorty shook his head. "Do you feel like lugging him places?" No, we'll have him walk on his own 2 feet when and where we can." "But Undertaker." "You idiot. We're police, remember. Call me Sergeant." "Yes, Sergeant, sir." A strange exchange anyway. Jinto sliced it. Were they really officers? If not, then who were they? They couldn't be enemy soldiers. But Jinto's train of thought crashed to a halt when he felt something mean and hard press against the back of his head. It was Shorty with his gun. "Thick as thieves, ain't you? Just so you understand, I'd like you to walk on your damned legs, but I'm willing to carry your ass if I have to. You ever been shot by a paralyzer? 'Cause let me tell you, you won't be blacking out with a smile on your face. Every muscle in your body's gonna scream." "Are you thugs really coppers?" asked Jinto. Slim whistled. "I like kids like him. Asking questions when he's this buried. Or maybe he's just too dumb to understand his position here. Color me right fascinated." "Yeah, whatever floats your boat," said Shorty. Then he ordered Big Lug again. "What are you doing, Daswani? Hurry up." The big one, apparently named Daswani, nodded without a word and opened the bedroom door. He took a step into the room and then froze. Then he shook his head, no, and started stepping back. At first, Jinto was totally lost. Then he saw Leifir in front of Daswani, and the situation turned clear as day. Leifir was wearing the inn's provided, white jumpsuit-type sleepwear. Her frosh glinted inorganically, peeking out from her sleep-tousled bangs. Her eyes, their corners higher than most, were narrowed coldly, and she had a phaser gripped in hand. A phaser was always an ill-omened, sinister sight. The guns packed the power to tear a human body to shreds with ease. Compared to lasers, paralyzer guns were a mere toy in both appearance and destructive capability. "It's the Av," muttered Youngin disgustedly. There really was one. Daswani found himself against the wall. No one moved a muscle. The first to break the silence was Shorty. Unexpectedly, though his brogue didn't evaporate, he spoke in error-free Baranu. "Drop the weapon, Av. Don't you care what happens to the boy? Even a paralyzer can kill at point-blank range. If he should die, so too do you all," said Leifier, her brow furrowed and her voice firm. "I shall not allow a single one of you to leave this room alive. And to warn you, I am in a supremely bad mood." "I know I would be," muttered Slim. "In fact, anyone would be, getting pulled from their sleep like that. Today I learned that the Av are no exception." His insightful discovery went ignored by the rest. "There are 4 of us and 1 of you." "How could we lose?" replied Shorty. She turned her nose up. "Care to try it?" Youngin grunted and tried pointing his paralyzer her way. Leifier was faster. She pursed her lips and whistled as she pulled the trigger. The beam of heat that fired from the phaser's muzzle hit his paralyzer dead on. Yoch! Youngin dropped it. It had turned terribly hot terribly quickly. Big Lug attempted to use that opening to brandish his own gun, but once again the phaser pierced through the paralyzer. Big Lug endured the heat and pulled the trigger, but the paralyzer had already been rendered inoperative. On both sides of his dumbfounded head, smoldering holes had been charred into the wall. Upon noticing, he sank down to the floor. "Don't shoot." "I surrender," said Slim, sticking up his arms as he threw away his paralyzer. "As you can see, I have received marksmanship training," she replied calmly. "I have a great many skills I'm proud of, and my sharpshooting is one of them. Yet at present, I am drowsy and my reflexes slow. As such, you mustn't count on my accuracy for my next shots." Again, a silence as thick as marble gripped the room. Shorty was frozen and dripping with a cold sweat. Though Jinto's limbs weren't being pinned anymore, the other 2 were still sitting on top of him, so he still couldn't extricate himself. Moreover, there was still the gun pressed against his head. Jinto thought of a small bit of advice. Guys? I think you ought to reassess the situation." Shorty shot him a dirty look. Then his line of sight moved to the paralyzer, followed by a glance at Leifier's phaser. Finally, he stared into the distance, his expression that of a man reminiscing about his blissful youth. Jinto gulped, eyeing the man warily all the while. When Shorty made up his mind, he acted swiftly. The paralyzer vanished from his hand like a mirage, while the 2 men atop him finally released Jinto from his status as a rug. Jinto tumbled back to his feet and strode to Leifier's side. "Excellent, you reassessed," said Jinto from the heart. "Reassess? Whatever do you mean?" said Shorty, pulling an expression that screamed, "I have no idea what you're talking about, but I'd sure love to find out before I snuff it." "I'm just glad we could come to an understanding," Jinto said, the forked tongue out at last. "Absolutely. Cross-cultural understanding is always worthwhile." "Welcome to the planet of Klasbule," said Shorty, his hands sticking up wide. The wind blew across the room, turning the air dar once again, the atmosphere stifling. "Maybe I spoke too soon." "Looks like we haven't come to an understanding after all," Jinto murmured. "Jinto, let's pull out. I'll keep my eyes on them, so go gather our things." "Yeah, guess that's the thing to do." Jinto shook his head and entered the bedroom. It didn't take him long to pack their bags. All of their clothing was stored in the duffel bag so that they could leave at a moment's notice. He returned to the scene with a phaser in his right hand and the duffel bag over his left shoulder. "Shall we bounce?" he asked Leifier. "Yep." She turned to address the others. "All of you, go to the bedroom." "Wait," said Shorty. "We're your allies." "Well, that was a funny way to show it," said Jinto. "Don't you want to know who we are?" "Nope," said Jinto coldly. "So young, but no curiosity." "Curiosity's the wellspring of betterment, you know," said Shorty. "I really don't care if you're Undertakers or a goddamned bird lovers association," he spat. The wrists they'd twisted were still throbbing, so he couldn't say he felt any affection for them. "The only Undertakers right here," said Shorty, pointing to himself. "That right? You must love your job." Do you manufacture corpses? Enough. You will hasten to the bedroom or else, Leifir urged. Damn it. The men shuffled into the bedroom at gunpoint. That was when another door, the door to the hallway, opened for all to hear. Fresh troops. The tension high, Jinto got his gun at the ready. If only you lot weren't such serial bunglers. Jinto was startled. It was the housekeeping lady. You're with them. I'm their leader, she said, her Baranyu more fluent even than Jinto's. I don't have a weapon, don't you worry. Then you're not an employee. I am not, no. And that bit about the sheaf, you made that up? Oh no, dearie, that's all true. You two are very unpopular among the actual employees. Jinto winced, but he was quick to pull himself together. You must have come in search of us, huh? Yes, she said. Then she smiled at Leifir. Little of lady, you have some blue showing in the whirl of your hair. If you're going to dye your hair, you need to do it diligently and regularly. I thank you for your advice, she said mirthlessly. Now join them in the bedroom. Wait. Hear us out first. If we cooperate, we'll both be better off for it. What do we do, Jinto? Leifir's expression was as severe as ever, but a little confusion had crept in. I guess it couldn't hurt to listen to what they've got to say. A wise decision, said the false housekeeper. Before anything else, I shall have you stand together in a line. Leifir indicated the window with her gun. Always shrewd, I see. Suitably impressed, she did as ordered. Anybody else reminded of an execution by firing squad? Mumbled Shorty. It's okay, Undertaker, said Slim. If that's what she wanted, she'd have already sliced a clean cross-section of our necks. You're not wrong, but I've always had to wonder, why does perfectly valid reasoning piss me off so much? The five of them lined up by the window. Now all of them could be monitored. First things first, allow us to introduce ourselves. You can call me Marka. And you can call me Undertaker. Course, that's not my real name, but it's what my comrades call me, said Shorty. My name's Min. My parents named me something else, but I never took to it, so I hope you'll call me Min, said Slim. Jinto noticed then that he had a mustache, colored red on the left and yellow on the right. I'm Bill. Ask anybody in town about Spee Wheels Bill, they'll have heard of me, said Youngin. Daswani, grumbled Big Lug. On that note, the five of them grew silent. When Jinto catoned on to what they were waiting for, he shrugged. Really sorry, guys, but I'm not in the mood to introduce myself. That's fine, said Marka, not looking disappointed for it. If I recall, you were on the inn's register as Silena and Jinto. Ah, right. So we'll just call you that. In your case, Jinto does seem to be your actual name. Clearly, Marka had sharp ears. She'd picked up on it when Leifir had addressed Jinto by name. Lena isn't enough name, though, said Min with a suspicious expression. If you want her real name, we're not telling, he said flatly. Not even her given name? She must be of quite the high rank. High-ranking enough for people to know her name. Is it safe to assume you're connected to the estate of the Marquis of Svagov? You can pry all you like, but we won't be obliging you. We don't even know who you are. Yes, of course, said Marka. We are members of the Klasbul Anti-Imperial Front. Anti-Imperial? Is that code for anti-Ov? We don't dislike Ovs, Jinto. We simply seek independence. We don't recognize the right of the Empire to station a lord here, or deny us the right to trade and explore with our own spaceships. But the Empire would never let you do that. Exactly. That's why we're forced to fight. With the Empire? No, with the Bird Lovers Association. Yes, with the Empire. And you know we're with the Empire, right? She's an Ov. Of course we know. But you said we're allies. And we are. Uh-huh. Jinto gave a big nod. It was then he grasped the unfathomability of the gap between them and the five hapless Klasbulians, and he turned around to face Leifir. Well, we heard them out. What say we hit the road? Hold your horses. We're not done talking. It's all over my head, okay? We're not talking to you, the imperial citizen. Marka's talking to the little of lady. As her attendant, you oughta just shut up and listen, said Bill. Offended though he was, he decided to own up to his misunderstanding and zip his lips. Even if he told them he was in fact a noble, it wouldn't be easy to convince them of that, and nothing good would have come of it anyway. Leifir, on the other hand, spoke up. His words are my words. Do not belittle him. Jinto saw the jealousy flash across Bill's eyes. So, what is your objective? Asked Leifir. Undertaker's lips curled in a smile. We want you to be our hostages. Jinto, it would seem we really had better leave this place. Couldn't agree more, said Jinto, his gun remaining at the ready as he made for the door with the irritated impatience of a cat forced to wear a hat. Bye-bye. It was a ton of fun meeting you. You were a great boredom killer. Of course they'd misunderstand if you put it that way. Marka nudged Undertaker on the noggin. I told you, hold your horses. If you have anything else to say, best out with it quickly. My arm's growing tired, said Leifir, giving them one last chance. Please listen. At this rate, you'll be taken into custody for sure, she started, rattling on without pause. You two don't know how this planet works. You're as out of place as a camel at a swim meet. But if we join forces, we can keep you hidden until the Ov make their return. That would be nice, said Jinto. He'd had his survival doubts, so if they could gain the help of some locals, they'd be in the best possible position. But why would anti-imperials like you do that for us? Isn't it obvious? So we can use you as bargaining chips, said Undertaker. For heaven's sake, shut up. Must you be renowned the world over for making things more stressful than they need to be, said Marka. But what Undertaker said is true. We want to negotiate with the Empire using you two, or rather, just the little lady. Now that we finally have an Ov in reach, we can't let her get swiped from us by some foreign occupation. What you seek is impossible. Even if I were Her Majesty the Empress herself, the Empire would never. Jinto understood what she was driving at. Hostage-taking would never get an Ov to acquiesce. No matter whether the hypothetical hostage were the Empress herself, and the demand a trifling one, it was simply not in the character of the Empire to give in. They would instead plot a suitable revenge against such foul play. Yet Jinto poked Leifir's side with an elbow and whispered, let's not deflate their ambitions, actually. If they think negotiation is in the cards, that's better for us. So we fool them? Leifir didn't bother hiding her disgust at the notion. We don't fool them. It's not like we fed them that ridiculous idea ourselves. That is true, but... Look, ill-conceived motives aren't exactly rare. We'd just be politely respecting their dreams. But they would learn that I won't work as a hostage eventually. Then, at that point, they would turn angry, would they not? Enough to want to kill us, surely. That's what hostage-taking typically entails. That's the thing, we won't really be their hostages. Just leave this to me. Once Marka saw she had their attention, she pelted them with words like a rapid-fire needle gun. How do you think we noticed you? You two are already the stuff of rumors. The man at the desk got a clear look at your face. You had your hair dyed black, but there's no mistaking an off face. You're too perfect looking to be a lander, and you were acting strangely to boot. The only conclusion to draw is that you're an Ov who's running from trouble. He also happens to be a supporter of ours, so news reached us first, but what would you have done if somebody leaked it to an enemy soldier? Do you honestly think you were hiding? More like you were ringing a bell advertising, there's an Ov here. Fine, we get it. He raised a hand to stop her. We'll give ourselves over. That is, if you follow our conditions. Hostages with conditions, said Undertaker, eyes open wide. You do know what a hostage is, don't you? Shut it, Undertaker. If you lot had done your jobs properly, we wouldn't be in such a bind. We would have had the advantage. We could have strongly urged them to be our hostages with the guns in our hands. Then why didn't you just do it yourself, Marka? You want a frail maiden like me to do the fighting? Talk about inconsiderate. Might you let me lay out our conditions sometime soon, said Jinto timidly. Go ahead, said Marka. 1. We're not handing you our weapons. Armed hostages. Now you're just desecrating the concept of a hostage. How many times do I need to tell you to shut it, Undertaker? Yes, what else? We do everything together. You can't leave our side unless we say so. Okay. Anything else? One last one. We want you to explain everything you do before you do it. Where you're going, what you're doing, etc. That's fine. And now that we've cleared the air, let's vacate the premises quickly. Marka had accepted their terms so readily that Jinto felt almost disappointed. Wait, she needs to change. He pointed at Leifir, who was still in her sleepwear. I prefer this attire, said Leifir. It's better than that atrocious garb you bought me. What do you think? He asked Marka. It doesn't look like it could be anything other than nightwear. And it's very strange to go out wearing nightwear here. See? He pulled clothes from out of the duffel bag and handed them to Lafier. Change into these and come back. Do not treat me like a child, she said indignantly, but she did as she was told and disappeared into the bedroom. You really an imperial citizen attendant of a noble girl? Asked Bill, clearly suspicious. Aren't you being a bit impolite? That's just an act. And what an act it is, said Marka. I've got a question of my own, said Jinto. What? You're all assuming the Empire retakes this planet. But what if they never come? What'll become of us then? You think they'd leave the planet to its own devices after they lost a battle, said Undertaker, staring at him unblinkingly. That's the craziest hot take I've heard all year. About 6,000 flat space, said Lair away from the Svogov Marquisate. There was the Scythe by Borbina Yun, 303 star system. 6,000, said Lair, only took 5 hours or so using a high-speed connecting vessel, and even a slower-speed transport freighter would take 7. For the Monarchy of Illich, where the gates were so far apart, it was practically a hop and a skip away. That was where the Ov fleet was positioned. The fleet's Glagak, flagship, was the patrol ship Kerdai. As it was designed with its potential use as a flagship in mind, its bridge was constructed with a 2-tier structure. In the higher tier of the bridge where command of the ship was conducted, the Gahor Glar, commander's bridge, was situated. That was where Tlaim Borg Ibder Lamser, Tlife, was pacing hurriedly. Looks like we've gotten to the good part. He was stocky for an Ov, his hair dark green, and his swarthy, convex face almost aquiline in its features, like some bird of prey. However, whenever a member of the Tlife family spoke, they laid bare the pointed fangs that were their unique family feature, thereby evoking not a falcon or hawk, but a savage beast. In either case, he exuded such a fierce aura that one would swear he was born to be a soldier. Though he was no different from other Ovs in his handsomeness, it was his countenance's ferocious intensity that left the bigger impression. The command bridge's Spennik, military staff, comprised 2 Kasariak, staff officers, and 1 Lushiak, adjutant, as well as a handful of Kabot, HQ personnel, all of whom were watching their restive commander-in-chief. On the wall behind the Glaherabak, commander's seat, at which Tlife was supposed to be calmly seated, 3 coat of arms banners hung in a triangle. At the top of that triangle lay the Runiglak, imperial flag, the 8-headed Goftnosh. At the base left lay the flag of the Timek Ralbriber, Ralbrib Naval Station. It too bore the dragon, but its base was red, and it was adorned with bolts of lightning. The flag at the right was the Tlife family's coat of arms, the Take, lamenting pheasant. Officers of Rachesek Iadbirer, half-fleet commander, rank or higher enjoyed the right to hang that particular banner. Lanu, Honorable, the patrol ship Atlas has brought back an up-to-date map of the situation, reported the Was Kassarer, chief of staff. His name was Cah Hyoer, Yarluk Botsateker, noble prince of Botsatek, Lemesh Chuis, Kilo Commander Lemesh. Unlike his commander, he had the typical slender of frame. His hair was the typical dark blue, and his features were average for an Ov, which was to say that maybe 1 in 1,000 landers could hope to compare to their perfection. His eyes always looked sleepy, giving the impression that he was only dimly aware of goings-on. They have they? Bring it here. Tlife nodded, expected good news. Yes, sir. Kayor gave one of his subordinates the sign. A stereoscopic video of flat space emerged. The currents of space-time particles from the densely crowded central band of the Milky Way gate belts and the space-time particles from the volcanoes of the outer brink of the 12th ring collided near the Svogov gate, making for a relatively high concentration area in the vicinity. Space-time bubbles had a hard time penetrating high-density areas, but they did make for easy escapes from flat space. For battles that involved mutual mine-flinging, whichever side lined up in formation in a high-concentration area had the advantage. It was akin to securing the high ground in a land war, and the map of flat space similarly displayed such areas as tall. Within that high-concentration area, a flock of space-time bubbles was assembling. That was the ideal spot to fend off any invasion of the Svogov Gate. The enemy has made contact with our ship, and so they've become aware of our approach, Kayor explained. Going by the mass, it is equivalent to 3 half-fleets. It's clearly an interception formation. As such, we believe that the enemy has no current plans to launch a preemptive strike from their base in Svagov. 3 half-fleets. I see. There really aren't that many of them after all. This was the good news he was awaiting, so Tlife beamed bright. That must be all of their forces, too. Probably, yes. I know that if I were a strategist on their side, I'd have them intercept using all of their forces. Enough speculation. Do you have any concrete information for me? I'm afraid not, said Kayur, shaking his head. In order to confirm anything, we need intelligence from Central, but we're currently lacking in that regard. The information department hadn't even caught wind of this invasion beforehand, so it's likely well beyond their means to grasp their total military strength. Ugh. The information department, said Tlife, making sure they heard the annoyance in his voice. A bunch of incompetent hacks unfit even to feed the cat. I feel you may be exaggerating slightly, Lanyu, said the Kaseriak Draka Communications Staff Officer Roy Beaumois, Vice Hecto Commander, Naso Treoa, pointedly. It hadn't been long since she'd transferred over from the Ryazan Spoder Rirager, Military Command HQ Information Department. When he'd badmouthed her old haunt, the sour look on her face said it all. I see. Tlife placed his chin against his fist and paced aimlessly around the room. The same Spoder Rirager, Director General of the Information Department, Koshmanch Fradek, Commodore, was a man against whom he bore a personal grudge. A grudge that traced its beginnings to a certain episode revolving around a sky-blue-haired girl and a room at their flight academy. Ever since then, they bickered every time they crossed paths. There's no doubt Koshmanch is a trash human or that he's as inept as it gets. The fact that a winner like him made such an important position can only be some nasty prank on the part of Ryazan, HQ. That said, it's hardly fair of me to paint all of his subordinates with the same brush. They slipped up this one time, but they've more or less done their jobs over the years. A man's man always takes back his words when he's wrong. Yes, I should take back what I said. I was wrong, said the Commander-in-Chief. Feeding the cat would be the perfect position for the crew over at the Information Department. I'm certain the members of the Information Department will feel honored by your words of praise, sir, said the Chief of Staff impassively. Good, I'm glad, said Tlife, pleased as punch. Nazotriak kept mum, her face a war ground of dueling emotions. Tlife proceeded to forget about the matter of the Information Department entirely, as he turned his thoughts to more serious concerns. Now then, how do we go about this? At the moment, he had 7 half-fleets under his command. The Iadbirek Akar, offensive half-fleet, Verdaim. The offensive half-fleet Rosser. The offensive half-fleet Yukupur. The offensive half-fleet Sidarek. The Iadbirek Botuder, strike half-fleet, Bask Gamlim. The Iadbirek Uzemr, reconnaissance half-fleet, Vdun. The Iadbirek Dikporer, supply half-fleet, Akmatuch. In addition, a handful more Saab Lagarata, independent squadrons, and a provisional fleet including HQ's Glaboriak, directly controlled warship, formed another unit adorned with the name of the Commander-in-Chief, the Bewire Tlaim, Tlife Fleet, totaling around 2,100 warships strong. Pitiful numbers, thought Tlife discontentedly. The fleet didn't even have a clear objective to begin with. When the Raubrub Naval Station learned of the attack on the Svagov Marquisate, they sent 7 half-fleets to Royglaherer Keimer, Naval Station Vice Commander-in-Chief, Commodore Tlife, as a temporary stopgap measure. Their foremost objective was reconnaissance, that is to say, determining the scope of the enemy's forces and snooping around for their plans. However, he had too many ships for just reconnaissance. Reconnaissance didn't even necessarily call for the formation of a fleet at all. He ought to leave it to the reconnaissance half-fleet under his command, the Vdun. On the other hand, he had too few ships for the retaking and anti-invasion defense of the Svagov Marquisate. I must have pulled the short end of the stick. As they sailed along, Tlife recalled the faces of his colleagues. The Raubrub Naval Station had 4 vice-commanders-in-chief, Tlife included. A naval station vice-commander-in-chief's position was assigned by the commander-in-chief when it came time for strategizing and drills. In peacetime, one possessed no fleet to command, but during times of crisis, they were always attended by staff officers. A patchwork fleet could operate, but not so for Glagam, headquarters. The other three were fine candidates for the job, so why him? Frankly put, Tlife had been nursing the feeling that he'd been treated unfairly the entire time he navigated to this place. He didn't even encounter the enemy invasion fleet he'd expected he would on the way over. It had been a perfectly smooth journey. Even drills had more nervous tension than this, if only slightly. Little wonder, when the enemy that lurked in the Svogov Marquisate had penetrated deep into Empire territory with such vastly insufficient forces. "We can win this," he said, running the sentiment by the Chief of Staff. Yes. That is, however, assuming that the whole of the enemy's forces is what has already appeared. Can't say I like fighting based on assumptions. Then shall we retreat? Shall we ask for reinforcements? I'll pretend you didn't say that, declared Tlife, raising an arm overhead. We're retaking the Svogov Marquisate. Yes, sir. The Chief of Staff clicked his heels and bowed. Kayur, how long will you take to draw up a plan? There are some matters that I must confirm first, he said quietly. What matters? Do we include the annihilation of the enemy as one of our strategic goals? Kasariak Ixkerhutr, Strategy Staff Officer, Hecto Commander Krier motioned. I think we should use a pincer attack. It was an intriguing proposal. Pincer attacks were flashy as far as war tactics went. It involved splitting one's ships and having them advance to their rear, cutting off escape. Then they'd attack from the flanks along with the main force. If it succeeded, they could obliterate the enemy without a trace. Plus, it was difficult to see how they could possibly lose in this situation. They had more than twice the total power of the opposing side. Even if each enemy ship destroyed one of theirs, it would still be possible for them to progress the battle toward a favorable position. Furthermore, Tlife had the reconnaissance half-fleet done. Upon hearing the words reconnaissance half-fleet, a person not versed in matters military would probably think it lightly armed and almost purely for support, but in fact, little could be further from the truth. It is the reconnaissance half-fleet's mission to rely on their brute strength to peer into hostile sectors. Slow and heavy battle line warships and weak assault warships would only get in the way. All of their tactical forces are made up of patrol ships. In addition, the Daihazum supply ships that accompanied them were the smaller variants, around the same size as the patrol ships themselves, and with the sheer maneuverability and destructive power to match. The strength of the fleet was even said to be 5 times greater than the standard assault fleet. Though it would be difficult to achieve owing to cost efficiency and operational flexibility issues, there was also an endless supply of zealous believers in the Star Forces who believed that all of its main forces should be composed of reconnaissance half-fleets. They were the so-called heavy cavalry unit, galloping across the heavens. And there was no more suitable unit to be the detached force for the pincer attack. Tlife considered it for a few seconds. Then, with reluctance, he shot the idea down. No can do. Our goal isn't battle, Peresi. It's simply the retaking of the Svogov Marquisate. This war won't be over for a while. Even if victory would be absolute, we can't afford to lose vessels or fleets in a purposeless battle. But sir, Krier tried to object. Shut your mouth and don't tempt me any more than you have already, said Tlife. Yes, sir. To her chagrin, Krier held her tongue. So, we'll be intimidating the enemy as we march, then, said Kayur. Right. In his heart he was all for the pincer attack, yet he nodded. We'll display our might through a horizontal single-line formation and slowly march our way in. Seeing that, they'd have to jump ship. Understood. I'll draft a rough plan along those lines. How long will it take before we can depart? What will we do about the patrol ships that are currently on the reconnaissance mission? We won't wait for them to finish, of course. We'll pick them back up on the way. In that case, it will take under 2 hours. No easing up. Do it in an hour. Understood. Tlife frowned. That Kayur accepted that time reduction so readily meant they could in fact take even less time. But it was too late now. He was the one who said, do it in an hour. Good. Now do it. If I don't see a fine strategy in an hour's time, my disappointment in you will be immense. Yes, sir. He watched the staff officers withdraw to the Chik-Ixkerhutr, strategist's room, and at last, Tlife took a seat on the commander's seat. Exactly 1 hour later, Kayur presented a ranking order for the march and the scheduled route. While Tlyfe had run his mouth earlier, ultimately, he trusted his chief of staff, so he approved the plan without even really skimming through it and issued the order to the fleet. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be retaking this fog off Marquisate. Unfortunately, we're going to do it without engaging. If by some unexpected windfall we do plunge into battle, I look forward to watching your beautiful warriors dance. Now lift off. 2,000 vessels spouted their propelling flames simultaneously.